And can you tell us more what is and what are we expecting from it?
But first of all, thank you. Thanks to you, your colleagues, for having organized this, and all the friends who are watching from across Europe this chat that we will have together. The State of the Union is, for now many years, a highlight in the calendar, both of the European Parliament but also of the whole institutions. Except this year, it comes with an additional challenge. We've already had 2 years of a pandemic. We now have, on top of that, war on our continent, with the illegal invasion of Russia into Ukraine and the ongoing unnecessary and violent and brutal killings of Ukrainian men, women and children. We also have increase in electricity prices, a huge social and economic impact on families, on young people across the European Union, as they feel the pinch of unprecedented prices for what we would call a basic and essential services in their households. We also have very, very rocky economic times. We have challenges for our industry. We have challenges for each country, which has its reality. So what we are looking forward to is a very, very long-ranging debate in a very difficult time between the Parliament and the European Commission next week, whereby the Parliament will be asking on where the progress has been made on individual legislative proposals, but most importantly also how we are going to respond to the very big problems we have at our time, which is what the citizens want from us.
Well, you already listed all the big issues, basically, the EU is facing today, and what are we going to expect from that. So I suggest that we have this 20 minutes, so we go straight to the questions that we received in advance from Together.eu community. This is a community created by the European Parliament where people can get connected and talk about European democracy, as well as our social media channels. So let's see on your screen. You will see messages from social media and videos that will be played. We will have a look at it, and then we come back to you to hear your answer. And the first questions are, of course, related with Russia's war in Ukraine. People are very concerned. You see from Instagram stories, we have Manu who's asking, how do you see the future of Ukraine in Europe?
Well, this is a very good question. Let's just say, when I was elected in January, I would never have thought that in our continent we are going to see war again. But from that war has emerged a new reality, a reality of a country which has sought refuge in Europe, which is fighting for European values, which is fighting for a war for the rest of the Europeans on this continent against an autocratic neighbor of the European Union. It has also led to a decision that 3 more countries will become candidate countries to the European Union. Who would have told us at the beginning of this year that we would be in this situation? We have also seen a very strong and determined decision, also unprecedented, of 2 countries, Finland and Sweden, to join NATO. These are all consequences of the geopolitical situation we are finding ourselves in, but also the understanding that Europe stands for hope, Europe stands for democracy, and Europe stands for freedom. And when one country on our continent has that at its peril, or it is being threatened, then the European Union can no longer expect other actors in the world to come in and solve the problems on our own continent. We did that for far too long. We looked away for far too long, even when our Baltic and Eastern neighborhood partners were telling us that there was a very big problem on our hands, that for far too long we were dependent on Russian gas, which is also a discussion we are having now as we move away, as we uncouple our dependence on Russia, as we make sure that we do not continue to pay for this war. And all this is encapsulated in how we look at the future. That is why when we look at the question of what is the future of Ukraine and Europe, I would say that they are intricately tied together. We have the same goals and the same values. And it is for those values that I have the honor of leading a European Parliament that has fought from day one of this war that we will seek to protect until the end of it.
we had a very similar question also from Instagram, knowing that the war it's been going on for a while now. Is support for Ukraine wavering?
Well, I would say that it would only waver if we allow it to waver. I would say that it is, let's say, understandable that going into a very difficult winter where the discussion is now focused on high inflation, high stratospheric prices, the big gap between the richer classes and the poorer classes, youth unemployment, huge parts of Europe that feel frustrated, marginalized, not represented by their political leaders. This is a real and essential daily challenge that we need to address, which is what we will be asking also, not only through legislation, but also to quick and immediate policy decisions to be taken, both in a financial, but also social and economic aspect as we go ahead in the next weeks and months to come. But that should not take us away from our promises and our commitment for war to no longer have its place in Europe. So this morning, actually, me and the political groups all met with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, and we continued to state our firm and unwavering commitment and solidarity, both in terms of pushing to ensure that the sanctions, also unprecedented, the packages of sanctions that we have adopted, will be fully implemented, that there are still gaps, and also to go further. How much more further can we go with the sanctions? How many more sectors need to be targeted in order for us to fight against another war, a hybrid war of propaganda, of misinformation, of false news posted as truths. This is something that we see every day across social media channels, across all sorts of communication channels. These are the next steps we need to take. And once we take them, once we realize that there are still millions of Ukrainians that are still internally displaced in Ukraine, they can't go back to their homes. What are we going to do? It's our responsibility to help in the reconstruction and rebuilding. How are we going to continue to protect and give refuge to those millions of Ukrainians who have been given shelter in such a wonderful and loving way by European citizens who opened their homes and their hearts to Ukrainians? So I would not say it's wavering, but on top of that, I would say it's my responsibility and my colleagues' responsibility to make sure that it does not waver.
Well, I'm sure our viewers will be happy to hear that. We do have a video question, as I mentioned, from Together.eu community on another very, very important issue, which is climate change. So let's have a look through the screen as well.
Hello. On behalf of EU, this is our question to the President of the European Parliament. How is the EP going to guarantee that the EU doesn't lose focus on its climate goals considering the global energy crisis?
Well, I would say thank you to Shaim for having asked us this question. It is a very good question because we were already on a very ambitious track in the European Parliament in order to address a challenge that has been put aside for far too many decades. We are the last generation of politicians that can actually do something about it. I need to make sure that my children, the next generations, are able to say that our generation has done something about it, has not only introduced legislation, has not only placed ambitious targets, but has met them. We are still very, very far away from meeting them, in some countries more than others, but that is where leadership is needed. This is the time, more than ever, where leadership and European Union unity has to show, has to be able to say that is a target that we can achieve and that we are going to do everything in our power for every country with its own significant realities to be able to achieve them. I would not say that the situation is different now. If anything, I would say that if we had ever a moment and an opportunity to invest more in renewables, to absorb the potential of wind and solar energy. I was in Portugal last week. I had fantastic meetings with youth in Portugal, and they all told me we have so many reserves. Why are they not used? Why are we still relying on unreliable partners for our our energy. At the same time, we need to also understand geopolitical realities. Some countries are more dependent, sometimes 100%, on Russian gas than others. How are we going to help those countries in order to make sure that young people in those countries can continue to pay for their essential services, continue to pay their bills, continue to make ends meet at the end of the month? So I would use as a parallel track, on the one hand, strong environmental ambition, on the other hand, strong economic situation that we need to also invest in order for our countries to continue to be economically stable. Because if we don't have economic stability, we will have political instability, and that is exactly what Putin wants.
And what we'd like to avoid, right? Now we have another question about the rule of law, also a very important one. And first it comes from LinkedIn. Bjorn is asking, how can the EU keep and advance our democratic values? It's what distinguishes us in this world, and it's our sustainable advantage. Some EU member states seem to believe that quasi-democracy is good enough. It isn't.
Well, first of all, thank you to Björn. He really puts, let's say, hits the nail on the head. Sustainable advantage is a good way to put it. In fact, thank you, Björn. I will use that term because we can be proud of the values that we share. They are not just values that exist in thin air. They are on paper. And for every country to join the European Union, you have to prove that they are practiced and in force and possible to be strengthened and protected in each member state. But we have also seen that once member states or once countries join the European Union, it is sometimes quite easy to forget the promises you made when you joined. And sometimes we realize that we don't have the tools in order to make sure that what you did when you entered the European Union has to be kept up, which is also a demand of the European Parliament, that we have a convention on the future of Europe, not only on the future, but also to discuss where the gaps are. And we have realized that there are gaps in making sure that our rule of law toolbox is strong. But let me also tell Björn something, and everybody watching us. If it were not for the European Parliament, we would not have that toolbox. If it were not for the European Parliament, we would not have a conditionality rule in our financial structure. Because for us, that was important, that when we are asking taxpayers to make sacrifices, when we are putting money at the disposal of EU governments, we want to make sure that they spend it well. Do they all do? No, they don't. That's what the European Parliament is here for.
We have another question, the video question from Together.eu volunteer, also about the rule of law. So let's have a look to the screen again.
I asked the European Parliament, why do they not sue the European Commission so the European Commission would implement infringement procedures upon the member states which do not respect the rule of law in the European Union?
Thanks a lot, Nika. Thank you for that question. I am a president that likes to cooperate with other EU institutions. I think we can be able to discuss, and we can not always do it in court. I think that's why the politics of persuasion and arguments, good arguments, have led for the European Commission to take additional steps against individual governments, and that is why there are quite a lot of infringements that are on the table. I also thank my 704 colleagues, members of the European Parliament, that have come together time and time again when there was infringement of basic media rules, when there was infringement of the judiciary, when there was infringement of state aid rules, in order for the Commission to take action against one member state or another. Sometimes that has meant that, yes, proceedings before the court were necessary, and that is where, in fact, the European Parliament acted. I look forward to the next, I say 2 years, a little bit less than 2 years, before we are in front of the citizens in 2024 to prove to them that this Parliament, the only directly elected institution of the European Union, has done what its citizens have asked for. Whether we act on migration, we act on the rule of law, we act on the environment, we act against autocracy. And I want to be able to say that we used all the tools at our disposal to do that. I think we've done that so far. We can do more, and I can assure you, and I can assure Nika, that we will.
Thank you. Well, another important issue that EU is facing is digitalization. So we have another video question from Jesus. So let's have a look at the screen.
Dear Ms. Metsola, this is Jesus Cordero from Young European Families of Spain, and I'm here from Entertainment to ask you how do you plan to conduct the political work in the European Parliament to better enforce the human rights in the digital sphere within the European Union? Thank you so much.
Rights in the digital sphere.
Yes.
We didn't used to talk about that a few years ago. When I joined the European Parliament, having data legislation or privacy legislation was really still far away. But then the European Parliament managed to push through an unprecedented regulation called the GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation. And last July, we took a historic vote on the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, with the aim of making sure that consumers are protected. Privacy is a foremost concern, but also the companies, digital companies, technology companies on which we rely, but which we need to ensure continue to be a force for good and not a force that is abused of by autocracies, by other malign players in our world. Also something that we are going to look forward to, the AI Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act. You know, Ruta, other countries around the world look to the European Parliament and the European Union and look at our legislation in order to try to push forward this balance that we have found in this House, also in those countries. I take that as a big compliment, but also one with big responsibility, because fundamental rights, what was just asked in terms of human rights, when we are talking about data, how data is used, but also how it can also be a force for good in research, in technology, in all areas. I mentioned Portugal. I visit, for example, medical institutions, how much they need to rely on data and privacy, but also the technology and the software needed and the investment in our researchers and our universities for us to have that competitive edge over other countries that have been raised with a much different value set to ours. That is what our legislation seeks to strengthen. We need to continue to do more. But now also the ball is in the court of the governments that the votes we take here are actually transformed into rules that apply on the ground. It's not always easy, and sometimes we take it for granted, but that's what the European Parliament is for.
And, well, then it's time to talk about the future of the EU, which is also an important issue. Many people have questions about it. And let's have a look to another video message from Dave Koch from Austria.
Dear Roberta, my name is Dave Koch and I'm from Austria, and I'm really curious how you and the European Parliament make the EU stronger, so that we're less dependent on events that happen outside of our borders, like the gas and power crisis.
How can we make the EU stronger?
I was trying to read the text is far away. Well, that's something that, you see behind you, one of the most amazing images. That was the moment when young people came from all over Europe and told us, political leaders, how we should make the EU better, stronger internally, when faced with global challenges, sometimes within our borders, sometimes also outside our borders, which is what we are facing now. I would answer Mr. Koch, who just asked the question that we should have acted much quicker on the energy union, that we should be able to buy gas or electricity and renewables from each other rather than from, frankly, our enemies. I think now's the time for us to do more also on the environmental front. But that picture also shows to me a discussion that took place that we need to discuss, and we can't use the word future, but also we need to discuss the gaps. We have seen over the past 2 years, when we needed to act together on health, we did it, even though it's not strictly speaking a competence of the European Union. When we needed to act together in order to make sure that we grant as quickly as possible macro-financial assistance to Ukraine, we did it. When we needed to be faster on adopting digital legislation, we did it faster than ever before. So there is the political will today, and I would like to harness that political will. And that is why the Parliament is pushing for a convention in order to fill those gaps. Are we not in time to discuss? Is it not now the best time to have an energy union? Is it not now the best time to have a health union? I think that is what our citizens want from us, and that is what we need to deliver.
And then the very last question, again, about the future, that comes from Inigo. Let's have a look to the screen. So Inigo on Facebook was saying that every day more people are realizing all the aspects of the EU, but I also found that the vast majority of people do not know anything about the EU. In your own personal experience, what is the best way to proselytize the wonders and some mistakes of the EU? Thank you and have a nice day, he's wishing to you. So basically, how can we communicate better in the future about the EU?
I think we need to be honest, and I think we need to be open. Sometimes we allow criticism to be leveled at the European Union when it is not the European Union's fault, but sometimes we don't say where we could have done better, where we failed, and we don't say mostly where we have succeeded. So it all boils down, first of all, to openness, transparency, fairness, being the home, not only if you live in a city, in a big metropolis, but in any town and village across the European Union, you need to feel part of the European Union, and you need to know that everything that is happening, how you can pay your bills, how you are facing medical shortages, how you are going to make sure you have equal access to health and education, that is thanks to the European Union. We don't say that enough. We don't say that this is what the European Union is doing. I come from a country where people know who their members of the European Parliament are. I would like everybody to know who their members of the European Parliament are. I would like members from all countries and now candidates as they gear up for the election in 2024 to knock on doors. We don't only communicate virtually. After 2 years of being only online, we also need to meet in this kind of setting. We need to go to all doors, to all parts of Europe and say, we are here, talk to us. What have we done wrong? What have we done good? Let's improve it, because the European Union can always improve. But we have to be ready also to take leadership in that. And this is why I have started since my election to go to each and every member state, to talk to young people, to listen, not only to stay in the main cities, but also go out into the countryside and encourage, ultimately, young people and everybody to make their voice heard. The opportunities in 2024, let's take it so that we continue in this constructive pro-European project that we have. Because Europe, at the moment there is a Czech presidency in charge, is a task, but let's be up to it.
Well, that's a very beautiful message, very inspiring message for the end of our interview. 20 minutes this time. We hope to see you another time.
You need to
maybe
ask me to stay longer next time.
We have many questions that we receive on social media, on together.eu community. So we hope to see you next time.
Absolutely.
And thank you everyone who was watching us, and stay tuned.